Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to the podcast. Today we'll be speaking with author Mike Chen. Mike is a New York Times bestselling author of Star Wars Brotherhood and 6 original novels, some of which are Here and Now and Then, Light Years from Home, A Quantum Love Story, and several others. And now, hot off the presses, now is this one a comic, the Star Trek Deep Space Nine? Is that a comic or is that a novel?
Yeah, it was a comic miniseries that came out over the course of 2023, and the trade paperback arrives February 13th.
February 13th. Hey, yeah, so that's hot off the press. It's called The Dog of War.
That's right.
Okay, all right. So all you Star Trek nerds out there, go get a copy of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, The Dog of War. Mike has also covered geek culture for sites such as Nerdist and the Mary Sue. Also covered the NHL for various outlets. So, wow. So welcome to the show, Mike.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure.
I'm an excited Asian today.
Yeah, you are an Infatuasian today. All right, so are you calling in from Silicon Valley today?
Yes, I am, in the Bay Area, very nearby Stanford.
Yeah, okay. And we're recording on February 11th, so this is not going to come out for a couple of weeks, but a belated Xinyan Kuai Le, everyone out there. Happy Chinese New Year's, happy Lunar New Year's, Year of the Dragon. We like to greet our guests in the Asian way, so Mike, have you eaten yet?
I have. It's funny because I got a Mexican omelet from a French restaurant in Palo Alto
on Chinese New Year's weekend.
Yeah. So that was kind of funny. But my wife, my foodie wife, my white foodie wife, ordered so many different types of Lunar New Year cakes. And so like last week, there was a day when like after my daughter got home from school, I think she ordered like 5 different like mini cakes, and like they're all variations of, like bean paste type cakes. And like I am not a food person at all. And so I'm like, I tell her, I'm like, this is why you love Lunar New Year, huh? The cakes. And she's like, that's right. So
yeah. I she's more after my own heart, I guess. I'm all about the celebratory foods. Now, last name is Chen. My last name is Chin. So in Chinese, our last names are the same. Do you what kind of Asian roots do you have?
It's I should know more about this. So my dad was born in Taiwan.
Okay.
My mom was born in mainland China. So my dad was born in 44. My mom was born in 46. My mom's dad was the police chief of their city. And then when the Communist Revolution happened, he lost all of his power. Basically, anyone in that form of like law enforcement or government was basically kneel to the Communist Party.
Enemy of the state, yeah.
Yeah, so they immigrated like very desperately to Taiwan.
Right.
And that's where my mom and my dad met. And then my dad went to grad school at San Jose State, and that's where they planted roots.
Yeah. It's such a common story, but like as a soft Californian, second, third, fourth generation, I can't imagine like uprooting your whole life, going from country to country, and then just making it work. Like it seems
it's funny because like I feel like there are things where like, and this is a very common, Asian, like first generation trope where like I would look at my parents and I'd be like, why is our car 20 years old? Like why do like we never go on vacation or anything? And they're like, you have to save what you earn. And like, looking back on it now, along like with the help of decades of therapy, and just like understanding historical context, so I'm like, oh, okay, I understand. They are just processing trauma from losing everything, when they were very young.
Yeah, no, and it trickles down. There's definitely studies on this, right? It definitely trickles down to next generations. Even though we're born here, like there's things about the way we process money, the way that we deal with change that probably comes from our ancestors who had to flee from one thing or another.
Yeah, definitely.
Were you a nerd growing up? Like, so I'm a little older than you. I remember seeing Star Wars in the theater at the Coronet movie theater when it first came out. So you might have been Return of the Jedi. Was that the first one you
Yeah,
saw?
Return of the Jedi was the first one that I saw in the theater. I was 5,
Uh huh.
and we went to Kmart on Hillsdale
Uh
in
huh.
San Jose right afterward, and that was or not Kmart, the Gemco actually,
Go. Yeah.
and that is now Target, or that became Target. I don't
Uh
know if it's
huh.
still there, but I remember like right afterward we went there because my parents had to pick up something, and they had like the Return of the Jedi like picture storybook
Uh huh.
there,
Uh
and like
huh.
the part of the movie that totally unnerved me as a 5-year-old was when Vader's helmet was removed.
Uh huh.
And of course, I opened the book and like I turned right to that
First image.
page.
Was
So
that the start of it? Where did your love for sci-fi come from?
it's basically that. Actually, my dad. It's funny because like even though my dad is, he was a civil engineer. He worked for
Hmm.
most of his career. He worked for semiconductor companies in Silicon Valley. But despite that, he has always been into like Western classical literature, which is just like the most, random thing. Like
Hmm.
he has read like so much of Shakespeare. He loves
Huh.
Greek mythology. Like he reads translations of like the Odyssey whenever they come out, things like that. And he also loved Star Trek, the original series.
Okay.
I think it was part of my own rebellion of like saying that like Star Trek, the original series sucked.
Uh-huh.
And
Well,
I
it
didn't,
it kind of did.
yeah. Like even now, as like someone who like, I mean, we watch Star Trek reruns like probably 50% of the time in the evenings in my house. And even still, it's like I just don't like the original series that
Yeah. Yeah.
much. But like I don't I noticed early on that science fiction, like it was never forced upon me. Like in some people like they kind of indoctrinate their kids. Like my dad tried to show me the original series of Star Trek, and when we went to see Star Wars and stuff, but there was just something about like spaceships that really
Yeah.
drew me more than like other fantasies. Like I remember when Transformers just came out,
Uh-huh.
and they came out at the same time as GI Joe. GI Joe just did not do it for me.
Huh. Uh-huh.
But Transformers were like, oh my God, these robots. And then Robotech came out in
Yeah.
1985 and just
Right.
completely changed my understanding of storytelling, like
Uh,
completely. And like
huh.
I feel like it still influences me to this day. So it was like every step that I got into some sort of new media, it was always like more sci-fi than like either military-based action or fantasy
Huh.
action.
Huh. Yeah. Was Min May your first crush?
No, no, not Min-May. Rook Bartley from the new generation of
Oh,
Robotech.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
give me like the tough, emotionally damaged biker chick.
Okay. Okay. All right. All right. We're peeling away the layers here. We're gonna get to
Yeah,
the novels in a minute, but we're trying to figure out who you are. So we're like
this might be the first Robotech question I've ever gotten in like all my
really.
years. Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, see, you need a middle-aged Asian dude interviewing
That's
you. That.
right. Yeah.
All right. So writing. So storytelling, writing. That's always been part of your DNA.
Yeah, I'm in my when I was growing up, I drew a lot. And then from drawing, I turned it into a lot of like my own like self-made comic strips.
Uh huh.
And I would do a lot of like storytelling in there, and it was usually just kind of like riffing off of my favorite franchises. So here we can have the Robotech crossover here. I would write these stories about like like what's going on in like the mess hall of the SDF-1 or something. Not like, the actual like epic stakes, but it was always like, how are the characters reacting afterwards? And I realized like now, like that is what I do as a writer now is like kind of more like the emotional stakes of like,
Yeah.
before and after rather than like the peak epic action moments. So I did a lot of that. And then I remember in high school, we had to write. It was either like you had a choice of writing an essay about something or writing a parody of it. and I
Uh-huh.
wrote this parody of the Grapes of Wrath, which you shouldn't do. Like Grapes of Wrath is like this super tragic book,
Uh-huh.
but I wrote this parody of it called The Oranges of Evil, and like it was actually like looking back at it, I remember like thinking about like writing in voice the first time and like
Uh-huh.
the pace of it and like something about it started to click for me and I like it made the class laugh, which was really important for like the nerdy kid. Uh,
Yeah.
and then in college, so my form of rebellion in college was so I had to get an engineering degree. Like I remember like my parents had like the talk of like you have to get something where you can get a job
Uh-huh.
afterward.
Right.
And I because I had talked about like maybe graphic design or maybe music or something like that. And they're like, no,
No, no.
that ain't happening. My dad still gives me grief for this. I may be one of the few Asians. I got into Berkeley and I went to UC Davis.
Right.
And my
Right.
dad gives me so much crap about that
To this
now,
day.
to this day. Yes. Um, but at UC Davis, I kind of made this sort of internal pledge to myself that like I'm going to be here for 4 years and I'm going to try to take like an extra arts related um, class every
Okay.
quarter. So I took a
Okay.
lot of like comparative literature. They don't actually have a theater minor in at Davis, or at least they didn't at the time. But I took
Hmm.
enough credits in it to, and I did some like small productions and stuff, and so it was basically enough to be a minor. Um, and senior year, I took creative writing, and it was I hadn't really written fiction since like
Hmm.
high school. But then I was writing it here, and it was just like I remember like this very profound sense of freedom. Like with
Hmm.
music, you're kind of limited to like your own skills and your
Yeah.
gear, and then with acting, you're kind of limited by like the script and like the how good you are and like how good
Uh-huh.
your support cast is. But with this, like I could just do anything that I wanted. And so my teacher, her name is Wendy Sheenan, and she told me she talked with me afterwards. She's like, "You destroyed the curve, and you should change your major to this because
Huh.
you really understand it." And I'm like,
Huh.
I don't know if you know Asian families, but you're not changing out of your engineering major.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And so she said, like, you should keep writing. And we're still in touch today. Like when I signed with my agent in 2015, I found her through LinkedIn. She is a VP at Simon and Schuster
Oh,
now.
wow.
So every time I have a release, I send her a copy of it.
Nice. Yeah, so we have that in common too. So I went to UC Davis. I'm
Mm.
older than you, so we didn't overlap. But yeah, I was a double major, biosci and theater.
Nice,
So I did
nice. I
drama.
appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it was a fun little department. It's not really well known at Davis. It's a very small department, but it's fun,
Yeah.
right? Like doing productions
Yeah, it was
and
just like it was nice to get out. I mean, like I was in my head, I was very like, I'm not going to be friends with any engineers, like that kind of stuff. And like,
uh-huh,
now I can see it's all kind of like this internalized like self-hate type of stuff.
uh-huh.
But at the time too, it's like, it's really important to show yourself that you can expand beyond kind of the tropes that your parents are passing down.
Yeah, yeah. Davis was a cool place, and I appreciate how you mix it in. Is it almost all your novels, like the
It is
ones that I've read?
every single book except for We Could Be Heroes, and that's only because that's a superhero novel that takes place in kind of like not our Earth. But otherwise, yeah, every book mentions Davis in some way.
Yeah, no, I love it, love it. Go Ags!
Yeah, go Ags.
All right, but then to honor your parents, you got a day job,
I got a day job. Yeah.
and you did that for. You did that for. Are you still doing it? You
Oh
still work?
yeah, yeah. I mean, this is the Bay Area. You can't
Yeah.
not have a day job. And my wife has medical conditions, so we need insurance because
Okay.
that's
Okay.
that's how our society works. So, yeah, every author I know has a day job or has like will fully admit the only reason that they can do this is because like there are like multiple books into their career, so they have
Yeah.
some form of like established base and their spouse makes a lot of money.
Yeah.
And that's literally only it because as an author you get these contracts that
Yeah.
span 2 to 5 years, depending on how many books you sign for, and you only get paid like 20% at a time at milestones.
Uh-huh.
So
Uh-huh.
you could get like 40% in one year, nothing the next year, and
Right,
then like the
right.
third year you can get 20%. So it's not a way to live.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. All right, so you do that. So you've been doing day job since college, but so
Hmm.
about I think we're celebrating 5 years since your first debut just this
Yes.
year. And I don't know how you do this, man. You've had six original novels in 5 years,
Yeah.
and plus other things. So plus the Star Wars, and plus Marvel, and plus Star Trek stuff.
I tell people that a lot of it is just panic
Okay,
that like I will, which again probably comes down to like, internalized Asian feelings of
okay.
like of not being, A plus.
All right. So it started off with Here and Now and Then,
Mhm,
2019. And then we go to a lot of a lot of different novels, but similar kind of threads. And
mhm,
I was thinking maybe we can talk about your most current book, A
mhm.
Quantum Love Story, but then we'll dabble into the other novels as well. Does that sound like a plan?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so let's see. Let's go ahead and give people a spoiler alert. We're not gonna give away the endings, or we're not gonna give away huge plot points. But if you haven't read Mike's books and you're interested to, you might want to get away from your device now and then listen to us after you've read. So I usually play a song here to kind of give people time to get away from their devices. I have one. I have one in mind, but do you have a song that you're thinking of that might be a song that we could play right here as an interlude?
Oh, it's funny. Like when I heard the episode with Abigail, I was like, oh yeah, this song would be perfect for it. And then like I just totally forgot. So,
All right, you want to hear my suggestion then?
sure, let's hear your suggestion.
Okay, I have two.
Okay.
One would be REM "End of the World"
Hmm.
as we know it, or Bowie and Queen "Under Pressure."
Under pressure.
Right? Okay,
Yeah.
because in honor of Bowie, we'll
Yes.
we'll do that one. Okay, so we're gonna play a little "Under Pressure." When the song's over, you can step away, and if you are still here, that means you're ready to hear some spoilers.
Pressure pushing down on me, pressing down on you. No man has fallen under pressure. The brings a building down, strips the family into.
All right, so A Quantum Love Story, published January 30th, 2024, so pretty
Hmm.
much hot off the presses.
Yep.
Available everywhere you get books. Takes place in San Francisco. That's another through line. So you have UC Davis and
Hmm.
Bay Area.
So someone asked me like, why do all of your books take place in the Bay Area? And like, and even We Could Be Heroes, it's San Delgado, which is like the fake, superhero San Francisco. And it's Stephen King does the same thing, and he's
Right.
talked about like you write what you know. And like one
Yeah.
thing I can do with like the Bay Area is like I know the geographic distances for like driving places and like what the
Uh-huh.
weather's gonna be, and like I know
Yeah.
that the Golden Gate Bridge is like where it's supposed to be and not next to Union Square, like what you
Yeah.
see in a lot of movies.
Right, right.
So I mean that's basically it.
Yeah. So we are in the future. How far in the future? 100 years in the future?
It takes place in like 2093, I believe.
Okay, so a little bit further in the future, at a particle accelerator, a technician there named Carter Cho and a visiting neuroscientist Mariana Pineda get thrown into a time loop that they relive the same thing every 4 days,
Hmm.
and it ends. Their time loop ends when the facility blows up, some sort of a malfunction, and that resets the time loop over and over again. And so they need to figure out a way to stop this malfunction so that they can get back to their normal lives, and the rest of the world can survive.
Yes.
All right, fair enough. Description?
Hmm.
Okay, so you've been called a genre-bending author a little
Hmm.
bit, so maybe I think I've heard you described as you have books about relationships that happen to have some science fiction thrown into it.
Yeah, that's like my, quote unquote brand, if you want to use a
Uh-huh.
marketing term. Like there are I know brilliant people who write like fantasy or urban fantasy or space opera or stuff with like more action and more like technical, systems, whether they're
Uh-huh.
magic systems or sci-fi systems or whatever. And they do really great work at what they do. I have always been, as a writer, wanted to kind of like capture like the quiet moments of characters
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
how they might be affected by like really insane things happening to
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I wanted to put them in the backdrop of, the sci-fi genres that I love. And I'm just really
Hmm.
fortunate that publishing as a whole seemed to really start accepting that sort of kind of crossover about
Hmm.
10 years ago.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, do you ever watch K-dramas?
I do not. My wife has started watching some, and my mom watches some.
You know what's interesting though? I didn't think you watched it, but they love time travel in K-dramas.
I did not know that.
Yeah, no, I didn't think you did for some reason. I don't know why, but there's a lot of time travel K-dramas. So I'll send you a list of a couple if you want to get into a few. It's kind of interesting because they definitely deal with relationships and feelings with the
Mhm.
sci-fi too. So you might like it. You might like it. But is that's kind of like just your style that you've always wanted to tell the relationship story within the
Yeah.
yeah.
I've always found that, like, I mean, even going back to like when we were talking about Robotech, like one of
Hmm.
my absolute favorite episodes of Robotech is called Rainy Night, and it takes place after the massive battle,
Hmm.
and it's Lisa Hayes and Claudia Grant talking about Claudia's relationship with Roy Fokker, as Lisa's trying to sort out her own feelings, and it's such a character episode, and to watch that as like, I was 7 when
Uh-huh.
Robotech came
Uh-huh.
out, and then like I remember like very early on, I'm like, this is a boring episode, but then you compare it to like in the years following it, like that really stuck with me because like I got to know them so much better.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that kind of storytelling is like my favorite episodes of TV, like even of like, the broader space opera type shows, like are always like the more character focused
Yeah.
ones.
Yeah. I'm guessing, like, because I'm around your age. Did you watch a lot of time travel stuff when you were a kid, or did you get us?
I watched Quantum Leap
Yeah. Uh-huh.
religiously and on repeats when it was on USA Network.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I was thinking that one. Let's see. What other one? Do you ever watch Time Bandits, Terry Gilliam?
I have seen that movie. Actually, my biggest association with Time Bandits is that I know that the time travel system in that was the inspiration for the Moongate system
Uh-huh.
used in the Ultima role-playing
Okay.
games.
Okay. Okay. And then how about Groundhog Day? Of course, you had to watch Groundhog Day. Right?
Yeah. I remember, like, I think I might have even seen that in the theater, and like, was not expecting it to be like science fiction. When it came out, like, I just was like, "Oh, it's a Bill Murray comedy. I want to see
Uh-huh.
this."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, you watched it because you thought it was a comedy, but there's some deep science in there as well. Not science, but there's some
Yeah.
some trippy stuff in there as well. All right, so you do seem to have a little bit of a fascination with time travel. A couple
Yeah.
novels.
I do think when it's done right, it can be a really interesting exploration of like how relationships change over time. And like, that was like my first book is like a father-daughter time travel story.
Mm,
And that one was like directly inspired by an episode of Star Trek Next Generation and an episode of Doctor Who.
mm, mm-hmm.
So it's like I think if you love sci-fi enough, you're going to get into time travel.
Yeah, that's true too. And then the other thing I notice about your books is, well, maybe this is true of most sci-fi, but there's always seems to be like a big problem that needs to be solved. And is that the engineer in you? Maybe you like, have you always liked solving problems?
Yeah, yeah. I think like, and my wife tells me to stop solving problems sometimes.
Just live.
Yeah, no, I think like, um, I mean, you're from a writing perspective, your story needs a plot
Sure. Yeah.
driver. Like that's always going to be important unless you write for like if you write an explicit like romantic comedy or romance story, like those genres have like different conventions. But in most commercial fiction, you're going to need like a larger like plot device.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, so for me, like anything that I do, it's like, because it is science fiction based, the problem's going to be like usually like based around like the elements of that science fiction society. And I like tropes, or I like subgenre tropes. So like time travel,
Uh-huh,
vampires.
uh-huh.
Like Light Years from Home was my like X-Files
Mm-hmm,
homage.
mm-hmm.
So it's like to take one of those subgenres and then like find like the natural conflict in there from a story perspective, but then put characters in there so I could kind of like play in my favorite subgenres.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's talk about characters a little bit. I heard you, or
Hmm.
I read you say that you use actors when you're thinking of your
Hmm.
characters. So Carter Cho, modeled
Hmm.
after our guy John Cho, and
John
then
Cho.
Mariana Pineda, modeled after
Hmm.
Danielle Pineda. Are there any other
Hmm.
Cowboy Bebop references in here that I missed? Or
No, no, no. Those are the so it was funny because at the time when I was writing this, it was just Mariana and Carter, and I did not really have like usually I cast people very, very early on, and it's a total cheat because that way I can see their
visual,
facial
yeah, yeah,
expressions. Yeah, I can hear their speaking cadence, and I don't have to make it up on my
uh,
own. And then with Mariana and Carter, I hadn't picked someone. Like I have actually found that when I write an Asian lead, like it can be difficult because there's just not too many.
yeah,
Like I mean, it's much different
yeah. Last
now.
2 years,
I
yeah.
would say like but like, you just don't have that large library of
Hmm.
like really well known that you can pull enough like mental data for like, I know how they're going to look and react and stuff like that. Um, and I'm glad that's changing because that sucks. Like
Right,
when you want to
right.
write for like proper representation. But then like I watched the Cowboy Bebop, like the live action one, which I'm still mad that they just gave up on. So I grew up like,
Mm,
I watched Cowboy Bebop in real time in like the late
uh-huh,
90s. And I have like some Ein stuff over here
uh-huh,
on my shelf.
uh-huh.
Um, and I was really excited about this. And like I found like I mean, this is my personal tangent on like adaptations. Adaptations should be like, it should carry the heart of the original, but feel free to play
Yeah,
with like plot
yeah,
and
yeah.
elements. And I was like, I loved this cast that they did. Like the cast was so perfect,
Hmm.
and it was like totally fine that like I could see where they're going to like really launch off to something different in season two. And then
Hmm.
they gave us 3 weeks
Yeah,
and they canceled. I'm still
yeah,
very, very mad about that.
yeah.
But anyways, so I was watching that at the time, and I'm like, screw it. I'm gonna pick those
Okay,
two and just stick them in my book,
okay.
and that's why they're
Yeah,
there. They even have the last
yeah,
names.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so funny story. So I did an episode on Cowboy Bebop, and then before the episode even came out on the podcast, they canceled. So I
So
was like, come
mad
on.
about that.
My hot take on that one was, though, I think I would have liked, a 25-year-old John Cho playing that character. I
Mhm.
mean, he's great. I mean,
Hey, we all look the
yeah,
same,
that's
man.
true. Maybe the energy level was just a little lower, 50-year-old John Cho. But
His hair was
no,
perfect for
I mean,
Spike,
yeah,
though.
no, you can't argue with the hair. Yeah. But okay, so John Carter Show, not John Show. Carter Show.
Mhm.
This is another interesting thing that you do a lot of times, and I think there's a reason why. But you have a lot of your Asian leads end up not
Mhm.
finishing college or not being good at college or kind of letting their parents
Yes.
down.
Yeah, and like I really deep dive into this in my book Vampire Weekend,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
which I like to say like that is like as autobiographical as I'm going to get,
Okay.
and like my
Even though it's
parent,
about vampires.
even though it's about vampires, yeah. um, but the feelings in there, like it's really about being a child of immigrants and looking for
Mm-hmm.
a subculture to throw yourself into because you don't know where you belong. And
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
book, the main character dives into punk rock, which is exactly
Mm-hmm.
what I did, and when I was like 13 or 14.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like part of it is like it's easy for me to write because like I,
Yeah.
I very much feel it, but I feel like there are enough Asians who are both like my generation and younger generations who still really struggle with
Yeah.
with that, like that sense of expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I find that the first generation experience is still really, really common, even though like,
Yeah.
we're in a time where like things like therapy are very accepted and encouraged and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. and yet you still have so many families who are kind of like stuck in like the rigidity of their expectations when they come over here. And it's important for us as like the younger generation to see our elders and understand like where they came from and why they're like that, but then also give
Yeah.
ourselves permission to be like, it's okay, you don't have to live up to their expectations. Because
Hmm.
if you're stuck in like trying to fulfill that without ever, exploring other areas, you're just going to be mad. And you don't want to be
Yeah.
mad at your parents.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll dive into that a little more later. But so Carter Cho, photographic memory. So obviously, can do well in school, but just didn't, for whatever reason, didn't do great in school. A little socially awkward.
Mhm.
Is a foodie though, so
Yes.
you wrote that for an homage to your wife.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny because like she's listening to the audiobook and she's like, "We've had some of these conversations." I'm like, "Yeah, it's easy material to mine." Like
Yeah.
I just do not care about food at all. Like I tell her it's like 95% pretty good for me, except for I'm very particular about ramen
Okay.
and burritos. But otherwise, it's like I really don't care, especially sweets. I just don't care.
Just sustenance.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's Mariana is the one who's not into food. PhD in psychology, tennis player, best friend and stepsister just presumably passed away,
Hmm.
and she has a chemically enhanced memory.
Hmm. Yes.
Now this is important because when the time loop resets, you can't bring notes with you.
Yes.
So basically, every morning Carter has to just write down everything he learned from the last 20 time loops. He has to
Yeah.
write it down.
And that was purely like coming up with a plot mechanic that could carry over into that
Yeah.
and then kind of building the character around it.
Yeah, because most of us would be like, "What did we do yesterday?"
Exactly. I forgot the alarm code for my house
Right.
like the other day, and like I've been putting it in for like 15 years.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, it's kind of a fun concept. This time loop, 4 days, where you have this huge problem to solve, and you keep trying different things every day, and even to the point of burnout. Like they
Yeah.
started getting kind of burnout at the end. But yeah, so what I thought was kind of fun was that you mix in here a love story. Was this your first love story, like pure love story?
I mean, there's been, we call in the industry we call them B plots. Um,
Uh-huh,
like there have been romance B plots before, but they've really been more about like representing like the character, character emotional growth.
hmm
Whereas this case, like I kind of wanted to challenge myself and like have it be more of like a core motivator for the characters as they need a reason to get out of the time loop besides just like we should because this is
Yeah,
like, getting annoying, but like to give
yeah,
themselves a chance at actually like they both come from these circumstances where they're like hung up for different reasons and they find each other that being around each other lets them kind of complete each other, and
hmm
then in the only way to really take a step forward together is to break out of this time loop. So it's about
hmm
giving themselves a chance for happiness.
yeah, yeah. And there's a huge sacrifice at the end that Mariana does that I don't know if I would have done that, if I had the choice to do it. But in the middle, though, it gets kind of fun because they realize, hey, we can run up our credit card bill. We
Yes.
can eat as many calories as we want. It doesn't matter. So, yeah, I think I would have probably let the time loop go on a little longer and gone to a different country every time loop.
That one of the plotting elements of this, like I tried to think, how long should I make the time loop? Because I wanted to give them enough space to explore. And usually in time loop stories, it's 24 hours.
Right.
And that's not enough time to,
Go
go
to
to a
Europe.
different country or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
So I came up with 4 days, which was just long enough that they could go do something and have it be meaningful for them,
hmm
but
hmm
not so long that it feels like, like it's not like a 2 week vacation where you're like, oh, that was restful, or something. There had
Uh-huh.
to still be, it had to be short enough that it created a level of tension to it.
Yeah.
But my
Yeah.
wife, as she's reading this, she's like, "Oh, I would totally be like Carter. I would order 5 breakfasts every day." Like,
Why not? Why not?
exactly.
Yeah, so it's really really fun, and then I think you explore a lot of Asian American themes as well in all your books, but even in this one, I think I think Carter is a little estranged from his parents, or he just never really talked to them as an adult, or.
He's estranged in a way that like it's funny because like my non-Asian readers, they'll be like, "Oh, Carter's, family is they're just kind of dicks," and I'm like, "Well, yeah," and then like the Asian readers are like, "Oh, I get it."
Yeah, yeah,
Like they're those kind of parents.
yeah.
And it's I think like I love my parents. I understand where they came from, but thanks to therapy and my wife who is very self-aware and like has gone through her own sense of therapy and like started to identify the things like in her background so she can see it when it's playing out in front of her at like my parents' kitchen table, and she's
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh, your parents like they kind of triangulate between you and your
Mm.
brother. It's like I see that like they're always talking your brother up in front of you. I
Uh-huh.
bet that they are talking you up in front of him,
Uh-huh.
and they're never encouraging you two to talk together." And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
"Oh shit, you're right." And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
and then I think back my whole life about because my brother was always the slightly more academic one.
Uh-huh.
Like he was like the A student, I was like the B plus student.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So I got a lot of crap about that.
Mm. Yeah.
And it kind of goes into like the why did you pick UC Davis type of
Right.
thing.
Right.
And so it's like it doesn't really matter that like I have published books and like an audience and like Star Trek comics and stuff like that, like I will still hear about how much my brother makes at his like as a project manager at his
Uh-huh.
biochem company or whatever.
Right. Right.
And so I don't think that's a rare experience for Asians, especially Asians who are like more artistically inclined.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and like I remember in the episode with Abigail, she did not tell her parents until she got a book contract, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
So I did the same thing. Like I did
Okay.
not want to tell. Like I got my agent. So when you sign with an agent, they put your book on what's called submission, where they send it out to editors. Usually the life of a submission is 6 to 12 months. After 12 months, they're like, okay, it didn't sell. We'll put it on the shelf. Go try something different. My first book was on submission for 18 months because we kept getting these like near misses. And
Uh.
so during that time, I did not tell my parents about it at all. And I
Mm-hmm.
think like after I signed the contract, I think it might have even been like when I got like when they were at like the advanced copy stage, and my wife was like, "You have to tell them some point."
Uh-huh.
So I just kind of like admitted to them, and it was like this really terrible and weird conversation.
Like awkward. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
but
uh,
it's like so it's funny because like they have read all of my or they were reading all of my books, and it was always because like they didn't. I would tell them like, "Oh, I have a new one coming
uh-huh.
out," and then I
Uh-huh.
would give them a copy. I did not give them a copy of Vampire Weekend
Uh-huh.
because that one is very personal in that. And I
Uh-huh.
was talking with my wife about that, and she goes, I don't think they have the self-awareness enough to recognize themselves in
Right.
there.
Right.
But if they did, you're afraid of them feeling bad, but they should feel bad.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of true. So
Uh-huh.
I have no
Uh-huh.
idea if they've read it or not.
Oh man.
I just like dance around that topic.
Did your conversations always start with "I'm not quitting my day job"?
Yes. Yes.
Just want to let you know.
Yeah, no, like so in my 20s when I was doing freelance journalism, I was also playing in rock bands
Uh-huh.
in the Bay Area and DJing at the time. And I remember like because like I grew up I was enrolled in piano lessons at 5 and I played till 18. And like my piano teacher was this really lovely like surrogate grandmother for her. Like as much as I kind of detested learning like the technicalities of classical piano, I
Mm.
loved every hour with her.
Uh,
She was so
mm.
important to me. But I pivoted, like I stayed with my piano lessons. It was the only way that I was allowed to get a guitar at 13.
Uh-huh.
And so I would spend hours just like learning this Nine Inch Nails riff or whatever in
Uh-huh.
my room. So it was not surprising to them that I wanted to play in bands. What was
Mhm.
surprising to them was that I would be playing gigs on weekdays. And so I would get these like really concerned calls from my mom where she's like, I saw that you played a show last night in San Francisco, but how can you get enough sleep, to go to work the next day? And because my mom was a retired nurse, and so she's like very much into like, medical health. And so like one of her big things was making sure you get enough sleep every day.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
Oh,
like they're not
man.
surprised by my creative endeavors, but they've like never fully endorsed them.
Yeah, you got to walk that line.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing not going full-time writing anytime soon.
No, I mean like that it's one of those things where like I think if you live in a place with cost of living like in the Midwest
hmm
and you don't
Yeah,
have like too many family obligations, then you can
yeah.
pull it off. But like,
Or if you're married to an engineer
yes,
or a nurse.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Man, we're kind of running out of time, but we didn't get to talk about Light Years from Home, which has lots of family dynamics in that
Mhm.
one. Lots of triangle table talks on that one.
Yeah, yeah. No, that one is it, it's I think like the running theme and it's like part of this is unconscious. Like I don't really see it until like I go back and reread it. But like the like sort of sibling dynamic of like you're not really talking to each other, you're kind of talking at each other
Yeah,
and
yeah.
through a third
Through
party.
yeah.
Um and the expectations that like come if you're while you're trying to navigate like those expectations and then not being able to talk to a sibling honestly about stuff, about the
Yeah,
messed up stuff that you went through. In their
yeah.
case, it was alien abduction.
Right. But other stuff too,
Yeah,
stuff on Earth as well. But
yeah.
yeah, so really, really fun stuff. I'm a huge fan, Mike. I'm going to read all your earlier stuff and can't wait for the next ones as well. So thanks for writing these.
Well, thank you for having me and for giving us Asians a place to vent about being Asian.
Yeah, right. All right, so you have survived our difficult questions. Are you ready for our lightning round?
I am ready for the lightning round.
All right, this is gonna make half your fans mad. Star Wars or Star Trek?
I was asked this at my launch event for Quantum Love Story, and it was positioned as if you could only pick one
Right.
for the
The other
rest
one
of your
doesn't.
life.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm using that caveat.
Okay.
If I can only pick and enjoy one for the rest of my life, I'm going with Star Trek. And the reason
Okay.
for that is because there's way more Star Trek than there is for Star Wars.
That's true.
And
Well,
so
for now.
for now, yes, like who knows what Paramount will do with selling Star Trek and
Yeah, yeah,
but as it stands, there's like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of episodes of Star
yeah.
Trek and not as much of Star Wars. So I will go with Star Trek.
You got a favorite newer Star Wars stuff like that's come out in the last few years?
God, I mean, like, I'm there's nothing that has come out that I've disliked, and I know like some people get really nitpicky about stuff, and I'm
Yeah.
just like, I'm just happy. Like, I grew up in the '80s, man. Like, we
Right.
were starved for Star Wars, and so
Yeah,
it's like I can
yeah.
appreciate it all. And as a storyteller, like I can appreciate like if something doesn't land with me, it's gonna land for someone else. And in
Yeah,
a
yeah.
fandom as big as Star Wars, I am just happy that like they really loved this part of Mandalorian season 3, which I thought was only okay. That's fine.
Good for
You know?
them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. If you were in a time loop, where would you travel to?
I would so I would basically just starting in the Bay Area, I would go to as many concerts as I could. And
Yeah.
then I would start traveling for concerts.
Well, okay, okay.
And that's basically it. That's how I
Yeah.
would do it.
You got a bucket list concert that you want to see?
My wife and I spent about because we've been together since we were both 22, and we spent our up until my daughter was born, where I was 36 and she was 35. We basically went to a concert like every week.
Oh,
So
wow.
like our only bucket list concerts are like bands that have come around since then or did not exist,
Right.
at the time.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Hey, since you're in the Bay Area, any foodie destination? Well, I should be asking your wife this.
um, yeah, you should be asking her. Okay, so this is not an Asian. Well, I guess it is.
We can go burrito. You want to give us your favorite burrito location?
In Palo Alto, I like Como Esta Taqueria in Middlefield. It's right next to the Walgreens on Middlefield. It's like the right balance between tasting authentic but not feeling like super heavy and horrible for you.
Okay. How about favorite time travel book or movie or show? I guess.
I mean, like, is it cheating to say Doctor Who?
No, no. I mean,
Like the whole thing is time travel.
yeah. So good. I liked. Let's see. I like 12 Monkeys a lot. Did you like 12 Monkeys?
I love the original movie. I have not actually seen the show yet, but I hear
Okay, no, yeah.
really great things about it. The showrunner for the 12 Monkeys show did the last two seasons of Star Trek Picard, and he did a really excellent job with that. So I want to go back and watch it.
Yeah, no, I like 12 Monkeys. Yeah. All right. Well, that does it for our lightning round. But we like to ask our guests at the end who their infatuasian is. Infatuasian is anyone in the Asian community that you admire, living or deceased. So, Mike Chen, who is your infatuasian?
I'm going to cite a collective, and I
Okay.
say any Asian in indie rock over the past 30 years.
Huh.
And it was funny because for the longest time, we didn't really get to like there just weren't really Asians in
Yeah.
rock at all. And so like whenever oh, it's a Smashing Pumpkins video. Is that an Asian guy
Yeah.
in there?
Or Mike Shinoda or something.
Yeah, Karen O from the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, like in the early
Yeah.
2000s, Ruben Wu from Ladytron, Mickey from Lush,
Yeah.
all of them, like just seeing them and knowing that this thing that has really captured me as my therapist pointed out, like you love these things that like express emotions because your parents never taught you to do it. I'm like, that's right. That's
Yeah,
exactly
yeah,
it. And so to
yeah.
have that and to feel seen and represented there is really important.
Yeah, very cool. And now there's so many more to choose from. It's like with YouTube, you could have just a guitar, an amp, and a cell phone, and you could produce.
I discovered Ricky Lee through this podcast, and
Okay.
he is amazing.
Yeah.
Like I'm teaching my daughter guitar right now, and I showed her some videos, and she's like, my daughter goes, "She's much better than you." I'm like, "Yes,
Right.
she is."
Yeah, she's amazing. Yeah, no, Ricky Lee, yeah. So sometimes she comes to California. I'll try to let you know if she ever comes out here.
Oh, that would be awesome. Yeah,
But she shreds. Yeah. And you know who else you might like on our podcast? Have you ever heard of Phuc Tran? He wrote Saigon.
No, actually, I don't.
Yeah, so he grew up. He's about your age, I think. He grew up in Vietnamese refugee. Grew up in like this small town, Pennsylvania, and he said punk rock and skateboarding saved his life. Out of survival, he had to hang out with some group, and he found the punk rockers were the only group that would accept him. So
I appreciate that, man. Yeah.
yeah, you might like him. Well, I think that does it for our episode. Let's see. So best of luck to you, Mike. You going to do any signings anytime soon?
There are a few things coming up. Like nothing's totally set. We're shooting for Books Inc. in Alameda. I think sometime in March. Not sure
Okay.
when. And then I will probably be at Stanford doing a lunchtime signing there in early May. I'm going to try to get another Asian author to talk to make it Asian American Month thing. Those are the only things on. And then in Napa County, I will be at the Napa County. I think they call it Napa County Geek Out. It's basically like their local Comic-Con. That's going to be end of May.
Okay. There's an Asian author, young woman, Grace Lee. Yeah, she's a medical student at Stanford.
Yeah.
So yeah, Portrait of a Thief might try to get her on. If she has time. I mean, she's in rotations probably.
No, I think you'll find that like a lot of us Asian authors, because it's such like a niche
Right.
for like being a published author in traditional publishing, and then also being Asian and living in the Bay Area. Like we've all like emailed or been in a Discord or
Sure.
something together.
Sure. Yeah. Or on the podcast.
Or on the podcast. Yeah, I have a list of names if you need them.
Yeah, no, I've been telling people, it's not everyone reads. Well, you know this. Not everyone reads books.
Yeah.
It turns out. But I love doing these podcasts because I think authors, are the best interviews because you're so involved in your work. You've given it so much thought. It's always fun to talk with you. So I feel like I could do an episode every week if I wanted to on a Bay Area author. Like there's so many of them.
There's quite a few of us here.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, good chatting with. I hope I'll bump into you one of these days, I think.
Hopefully. Yeah. I mean, like I'm around. My next book is my Marvel one that comes out in October. So
Okay.
I'll probably be doing something for that.
Dang, you doing like 2 books a year now? What's going on over there?
Like after like right now, like that's my last contracted one, and I have a
Okay.
bunch of stuff like on proposals. So after that, there'll probably be a gap of like a year to a year and a half, depending on how things play out over the next few weeks. But
Slacker.
yeah, I know. Don't tell my parents.
All right, everyone out there, you can follow Mike on Instagram at Mike Chen Writer or at his website, MikeChenBooks.com.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone out there, thanks for listening. If you want to write to us, you can write to us at infatuationpodcast@gmail.com and follow us on Instagram at infatuationpodcast. And I'll put all of our details in the show notes. And please listen and follow us wherever you get your podcast. And you can leave us a review over at Apple and Spotify. So on behalf of Mike and myself, we hope that you're all happy, healthy, and safe out there. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.
Cool. Thank you, sir.